Welcome to Stan Now Considers All Things. How much talk there is nowadays about race and IQ, heredity, comparing this group with that group. Each of us belongs to many subgroups. You're grouped by age, by race, by gender, by education, by income, by IQ. They ask in a dozen ways which group does better. Social scientists and other concerned individuals look at the different groups, have different criteria, and ask different questions. But they miss a vital point. You're in group B, say, and group A is 15 points ahead of you on some scale or another. Let's ask two questions. First of all, do you think that in that group that's ahead of you, if you're in group B and they're in the advanced group A, do you think that the typical member of that group works as hard as he or she can, is always working up to capacity? Doesn't matter what the groups are. Do you think that group that's ahead of you is always right on the ball? I've never seen any group that has members like that, be it gender or IQ or race or anything else. Not all working at their capacity. Second question, are you working anywhere near your capacity? You see, if they're not working in that advanced group about to their capacity, and you're not working up to your capacity, then it may make a difference that you're in group B rather than in group A. Oh, by the way, every one of us is in some second best group B. On some scale, every one of us can point to some grouping we're in and say, oh, you've got to excuse me, I'm not in the top group of whatever. I'm oppressed. I'm not in the hotshot group. You can't expect much of me. Pony poop. Much more than the group you're in. What matters is your own determination, your drive, your discipline. Your mind is waiting to be filled with the best in literature and music and art and plays. Your body, there are miles out there to be run or skied or biked or hiked. There are children to be tutored, blood to be donated, prayers to be said. What if you were really noted for your self-discipline? Imagine, you can go all the way through high school and all the way through college and never take a single course in philosophy. Now, if you're going to major in food preparation or become a rocket scientist or an accountant, you may figure, well, I never needed philosophy in my work, so that's one less course, one less irrelevant course I'll need to take. Is it irrelevant? If all you want to do is graduate from college and manage some king of French fries fast food restaurant, well, you could think to yourself, I don't need to know who Aristotle was, Well, think again. 10 times, 100 times a day, as you order your supplies for your King of French Fries restaurant, or you hire or you fire employees, or you deal with irate customers, or you try to deal with the state and its impossible demands, as you decide whether you're going to work longer hours or spend that time with your family, at every turn, the field of philosophy is there. What you think about the nature of the universe, that's metaphysics, determines how you will act. When you ask questions like, is the world consistent? Is it reliable? Is it knowable? When you ask, is there a God? Or what are my life goals? Or is it okay to lie? Or to be insulting? What happens when it comes time for you to order the grease to cook the French fries in? Do you order the olive oil, which may lower your customers' bad cholesterol levels? Or do you order the cheaper steer fat grease lard and think to yourself, after all, they're eating in a fast food restaurant and they should know better? Philosophy directly addresses these kinds of questions. What do you do when your wife asks you about that cute little waitress you hired last week? The one that's so stupid she can't make change for a $1 bill, but looks like a $500 hooker. If all you know of life is what you've seen on TV, then what you tell your wife may be limited to the two typical American responses. Mumble, 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 or lie, 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 lie. If you are a breathing human being, no matter what your career goals are, the study of philosophy is essential to your happiness. One of the oldest sciences is that of astronomy. Every well-educated person should have at least some vague notion of what's up there. Let's construct a model of the solar system, one that you can carry in your head for some feeling of what it's all about. And I guarantee that for 99% of you, I'll tell you at least one or two things that you didn't know about. For a long time, it's felt that the Earth was the center of the cosmos, and the sun and the moon and the stars all revolved around it. And after all, the reasoning was, it doesn't feel like we're moving, does it? So we must not be. When the early stargazers looked up into the night sky, the stars seemed to be fixed on a giant black sphere, rotating all in unison. The relative positions of the various stars stayed fixed. And we could pick out various groupings. There's a constellation, there's the Big Dipper, there's Orion. But in that fixed field of stars, there was the wanderers, the planets. Venus or Mars, for example, might be with this constellation, and then later on wander through and be with this constellation. What was especially peculiar about those wanderers, those planets, was their backward motion. For months, Mars would come like that across the sky, the constellations, and then it would go backwards for a while, and then it would go forwards again. Strange. But once we figured out that the sun is at the center of our solar system instead of the Earth, then the backward motion of Mars, that retrograde motion, made more sense. Here's a diagram, just a diagram of our solar system, with Earth in the third orbit out, and Mars in the fourth orbit. The first 4 planets in the solar system: Mercury, Venus, Earth is third, Mars is fourth. The backward motion of Mars happens when we pass by Mars on our quicker inside track. Well, let's get the proportions right now for the solar system. Those little solar system diagrams you see in the encyclopedias just don't get the proportions, the sizes right. So let's start with Earth. I've got here a marble. I wish it were a blue marble, but it's a bounceable marble. And so let's suppose the Earth were this size. Yeah, there it is. I wish it were blue because that's what the color of it looks like with the oceans that we have over most of the surface. All right, if that's the size of the Earth, what's the size of the Sun in proportion? Well, it turns out that it's about the size, my hands go outside the screen, but the size of a beach ball, a medicine ball. 3 yards wide, say, 3 feet wide rather. About a meter across if you want to talk scientific. So the Earth would be like this, and a beach ball like this, for the size of the two. Now, how far apart do I put the Earth and the Sun to make everything in proportion? How far? Make a mental guess for a moment before I name the number. Is it going to be like 10 feet away with the Earth going around the Sun? 20 feet? Would you believe, if I'm going to put these in proportion, this is the Earth, the Sun the size of a beach ball, that I should place them 300 yards away from each other? 300 yards. All right, so here's a picture of my neighbor's house that's about 300 yards away, roughly. Here's the one I'm looking at. That's the neighbor's house. So if I put the Earth here, and I put the medicine ball on my neighbor's driveway 300 yards away, I've got the proportions right. Now the closest star to our solar system, if I put that in the scale model, this, 300 yards to the Sun, the closest star is Alpha Centauri. And in our scale model, I'd have to place Alpha Centauri 49,000 miles away from this Earth. That's the distance from Reno to New York. Go there 16 times, more than that. There's a lot of space out there in space. You ever visit a school on Parents' Night and look at all of that kindergarten art pinned up on the bulletin boards? To my eye, most of it looks sort of all the same. Same old stuff. Well, some of it's a little bit more advanced and some of it's a little retarded. But it's pretty much homogeneous. In contrast, you go to a good museum and look at the art, and it's a huge variety that you see. What happened in the growing up? Part of it, well, of course, is that the copycat artists don't make their way into the museum. But I heard a great new word invented recently. It's a kind of fun word. It's for those people that follow the herd all the time, that don't do thinking for themselves, that remain undifferentiated from all their buddies. They're called sheeple. If you're well educated, it's next to impossible for you to become one of the sheeple. It's tough to herd you along with the crowd when you individually have wrestled with the great texts and with the conflicting voices that emanate from that literature. You become both well-informed and you develop a kind of critical ear. The platitudes of the orating politician, my fellow Americans, etc., who tells you I've never inhaled, invoke the same response in you as an Ipecac milkshake. The sheeple listen to the 6 o'clock news on TV, and they read the newspaper maybe, and they talk with their buddies in the laundromat or the bar or wherever else. And they talk about football or how the blacks are always, since slavery days, always producing illegitimate children. That's sheeple talk. The sheeple might read in the newspaper that in 1990, the white illegitimacy rate was 21%, whereas the black illegitimacy rate was 65%. And it's true. But with limited access to just that newspaper information, you miss something critical. The newspaper doesn't report that in 1938, for example, only 8% of black kids were born to unmarried women. 8%. Now the whole question changes when you've got that extra information. It's not just a sheeple type question of why the blacks have so many illegitimate children. It's the question, how did 8% rate in 1938 change into a 1990 rate of 65%? 8% to 65%? You ask a different question. What caused it? Or was it, for example, related to all the financial help in quotation marks, all the help that the government has offered to women who will have children out of wedlock? Being one of the sheeple or being well educated, it changes your worldview. Sometimes it's just the little things in using the English language that can trip you up. Writing a little love note to your main squeeze. Oh, and it comes time to stick in some commas. You know what a comma is? That's a comma right there. I turned a semicolon into a comma. Something as simple dimple as a bunch of adjectives and a noun. And you got to put in the commas. Now I'm going to make a homemade sentence all by myself. I thought it up, and I'm going to give it to you as a gift. It's your writing, and you write your sweetie the following sentence. Ready? Here it goes. Tomorrow, I'll signal you using my new, that's the first adjective, improved, that's the second adjective. Oh, this is getting exciting. Extra loud, that's the third adjective. Beautiful, fourth adjective. Drums, I'll signal you. And you need commas between all the adjectives. So let me put them in. You ready? Here they go. Yeah. Oh, all of you knew that. But there's something tricky coming up. But now here's something more exciting. Again, I'm going to put a list of adjectives in front of a noun. But it ain't going to be the same. Yeah, oh, it'll be different. Oh. Here's my new second homemade sentence. My drums are the beautiful, yeah, improved, yeah, snare
drums sitting in the corner. Now I'm going to put in commas. Ooh, here they go. They'll put the commas in. But there isn't a comma. No comma between improved and snare. Huh? Snare is an adjective. Improved is an adjective. We put commas between all the adjectives before, but not now. The rule. Do you like rules? I give you a rule. The rule is when you've got a whole string of adjectives in front of the noun. Oh, I love it, I love it, I love it. If the last adjective, right before the noun, if that adjective does more than just modify the noun, more than modify it, but identifies it. If it identifies the noun, you lose the comma before that before that identifying adjective. So let's compare right side by side, up and down, the two cases. In the first case, it was improved, extra loud, beautiful drum. But beautiful does not identify the drums, it merely modifies it. So there's commas all over the place. But the second line down there, new, beautiful, improved snare drums, snare does more than just modify. It identifies which drums. I didn't have the old tom-toms, I didn't have the big bass drums, I had snare drums. And so snare, identifying the noun, gets no comma in front of it. That's to the left of it. And now, with this important new piece of information, you can write your love muffin with the full confidence that you will get your commas right and you will look real bright.
The world of art. There are certain artists that appeal to me. I like their stuff. There are three painters I want to look at. One today, El Greco. And then in succeeding weeks, I want to look at Rubens and John Singer Sargent. For those of you who know a little bit about art, you can see that those three individuals, El Greco, Rubens, and Sargent, have painting styles of painting. They're entirely diverse one from another. They paint about different subjects. Their communication to you, the viewer, is different for each of those artists. And it's really hard to mistake Rubens for an El Greco or an El Greco for a Sargent. Today, El Greco. The painting, The Agony in the Garden. It was painted almost exactly 400 years ago, about 1590. When you look at that painting, there's two different aspects to notice. In fact, when you look at any painting, there are two different things to look at. One is the form that the artist has put, and the second is its content, what the artist is trying to talk and say to you. The form of El Greco's paintings, let's start there. And it's pretty easy to identify several of the aspects of El Greco's paintings that are uniquely his. Look at the face, the hands, the bodies. They're all elongated. I don't get the feeling that they're skinny as much as they've been sort of stretched out vertically. Here's a detail from the picture by El Greco of the martyrdom of Saint Maurice. Look at that same thing, the stretched out feeling, vertical, stretch out. Or here, the adoration of the shepherds. Look for that same form. Or in its most extreme, when El Greco painted Saint Jerome as cardinal. Now, my camera isn't tilted. That's the way the painting looks. Now, earlier in El Greco's painting career, it isn't as extreme, that stretching. Here, for example, is a lady in a fur wrap. But look at those eyes. Those eyes are enchanting. Back to the agony in the garden. El Greco has characteristic colors that he uses in many, many of his paintings. There's 4 of them that I see. He's got black and sulfur yellow and a red that's mixed with either white or black. I count that as 2 colors if you like. These same colors, the black, the sulfur yellow, the red mixed with either white or black, look in the martyrdom of St. Maurice again. Do you see those colors? Or look again in the adoration of the shepherds, that black, that sulfur yellow, and that red that's either always mixed either with white or with black. It's a form that El Greco has. These colors, together with those razor-sharp edges, give El Greco's works an intensity. Contrast that intensity with, say, John Singer Sargent's painting of Almina. Now let's look at the form. Instead of looking at the form, let's look at El Greco's Agony in the Garden in terms of content, what he's trying to communicate. Let's go from some of the easiest things to spot to some of the more difficult. Easy. In the upper left-hand corner, that's an angel. Everybody can pick that out and figure that's an angel. The title, The Agony in the Garden, gives you the hint that in the center of the picture, that's Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Like many pieces of art, in order to understand them, a knowledge of Western civilization, of the history, of the art that has preceded, of the literature that's preceded the particular piece of art, is often essential in seeing some of the meanings of the piece. It's Jesus in the night before his execution. Then let's look right below the angel at those figures. And in that story, if we know the biblical story, those would be the disciples sleeping. The cup in the angel's hand. That's a little bit more difficult. But in the story of the Garden of Gethsemane, with Jesus praying in agony that the cup be taken from him, if it were possible, that cup of suffering, that gives a meaning for the cup that is in the angel's hands. One thing to notice about that picture of the agony in the garden is that that isn't the kind of picture you'd choose if you were doing an illustration or picking out illustrations to illustrate famous Bible stories for a book you were editing. El Greco's Agony in the Garden is not meant as a teaching tool. Some of the deeper meaning of the content comes from the history of that painting. El Greco was working in Spain at that time, and it was the time of the Catholic Counter-Reformation. The church at that time was insisting on clarity of presentation and on painting in a naturalistic style. That's what the church said they wanted. El Greco was heading in the opposite direction, with paintings that declared that this life was more the dream and the reality was not here, but the reality that counted was the reality of the transcendent.